How I survived the toxic friendship that almost destroyed my love and left me on the brink of the abyss. There are days when I still wake up feeling trapped in that phase of my life, as if the voices, the looks, and the silences still echo within me. You can't pretend it's over, because certain experiences don't just fade with time. They settle in, shape us, and force us to find courage where before there was only fear. What I experienced with Sabrina taught me a lot, especially about how far love goes when someone is sabotaging it from behind. When I met Sabrina, I thought the worst was behind me. I was coming out of a divorce, trying to rebuild my life, and finally felt like I'd found someone who spoke the same emotional language as me. But what I didn't imagine was that, along with her, would come a burden I'd never faced. Her best friend, Raphael. At first, it seemed normal. Sabrina talked about him a lot, and I tried to understand. They had a long history of friendship, full of complicity and support, and I respected that. But little by little, I began to notice something different, almost imperceptible. That kind of presence that takes up too much space, that doesn't know its own limits. Raphael was always there, even when he didn't need to be. He texted constantly, made jokes about me, showed up at inopportune moments, and when I tried to set boundaries, he became the villain. Sabrina apologized, not to me, but to him, and it started to hurt. I remember a specific night that marked the beginning of my real discomfort. We were at home, having a quiet dinner, and Raphael showed up unannounced. He said he was passing by and decided to come upstairs. I tried to hide my discomfort, but inside I was boiling. He sat down, opened the fridge, grabbed a beer, and started talking as if he owned the place. Sabrina laughed, finding it natural. I felt invisible. It was as if this guy had a free pass to cross all boundaries, including those of my relationship. When he left, I tried to talk to her. I talked about respect, about space, but she only replied, "Gabriel, Raphael is like that. He doesn't mean any harm." And that's when I realized the problem was much deeper than I imagined. Things started to repeat themselves. Every time Raphael showed up, something between us broke. He provoked subtle arguments, sowed doubts, made comments about my behavior, my intentions. And Sabrina, as much as she claimed to love me, seemed to believe him more than me. I began to doubt myself, wondering if I was being paranoid. But then the coincidences came. A deleted message, a late-night call, an emergency when he always needed her. Raphael fed off this power, and Sabrina, without realizing it, fed it too. I tried to breathe, to remain calm, but inside me grew a mixture of anger and sadness. I loved her, but I was beginning to hate what this bond was doing to us. My body began to feel it even before my head could. Insomnia, tightness in my chest, loss of appetite. I worked tired, unfocused, because my mind kept returning to the same question. How far can respect go when love can't set boundaries? My friend said I'd changed, quieter, more tense, and it was true. I walked on eggshells in my own home, afraid of appearing controlling or jealous. I kept quiet for fear of losing, and in that silence, I slowly lost myself. The worst part is when the person you love starts to see you through the eyes of someone who hates you. That's what started happening. Everything I said was interpreted as criticism. Every attempt at dialogue turned into a fight. And Raphael always appeared right after with that savior air, reinforcing the idea that she deserved someone more soft. I started to feel angry at him, but also angry at myself for not being able to break out of that spiral. It was as if the relationship had become a silent triangle, where I struggled alone to maintain something that was constantly being sabotaged. I knew Raphael had a history of interfering in her other relationships. Her ex-husband Tullio had been through it. But when I tried to broach the subject, she completely shut down. She said I was being just like Tullio. The remark destroyed me inside. I remember one night when Raphael went completely overboard. He and Sabrina had argued over a project they were working on together, and he, completely upset, went to her apartment. I was there. I saw him push the door open, yell, and when I tried to intervene, he pushed me hard. Sabrina was crying, but still tried to calm him down. I'll never forget that scene, the fear on her face, the helplessness in me. I called the police, and even then, she begged me not to do anything so as not to make things worse. It was that day that I realized the problem wasn't Raphael anymore. It was how emotionally attached she was to him, as if that bond had become a dependency. In the following days, silence fell over the house. I tried to talk, but she withdrew. Raphael somehow still managed to send her messages, apologizing, playing the victim, saying he was going through a rough patch, and she believed it. I felt the ground disappear from under my feet, as if logic no longer existed. It was such a subtle manipulation that before I realized it, I was isolating myself from everyone to try to fix something that wasn't solely up to me. Mateus, her brother, was one of the few who noticed what was happening. He reached out to me and said he'd also tried to open her eyes, but that Raphael always managed to turn things around. It was the first time I felt less alone in that mess. Even so, I still tried to believe that love could overcome it. I tried to suggest couples therapy, deeper conversations, but Sabrina said she didn't see the need. It was as if she were numb. Bianca, Mateus's wife, said something to me that I've never forgotten. She'll only wake up when the suffering is greater than the attachment. At the time, it hurt to hear, but it was the absolute truth. I started keeping everything to myself, writing rants I never sent, drafts that ended in tears. I looked in the mirror and no longer recognized the man I was. I, who had always been rational and balanced, was on the verge of a breakdown. The turning point came one random morning. I'd been up all night, and when I woke up, I saw a notification on her phone. It was Raphael again. He'd sent a photo of the two of them from years ago, with the caption, "We were better when no one got involved." It filled me with a mixture of disgust and pity. I got up, looked at her sleeping, and felt an absurd weight on my chest. I realized that if I didn't walk away, I would end up destroying myself. I spent the entire day silent, reflecting. Late that afternoon, I sat next to her and told her I had to leave. She cried, begged me not to do it, said I was giving up on her, but in truth, I was choosing to survive. Leaving that house was one of the hardest things I've ever done. There was no shouting, no fuss, just a heavy silence, the kind that says more than any words. I packed my things into 2 suitcases without looking around much. Each object seemed to carry an absurd emotional weight, as if pulling me back. When I closed the door, I felt relief and pain at the same time. It was like ripping away something that was a part of me. In the following days, I slept poorly, feeling like I was abandoning someone I loved. But deep down, I knew I was saving myself from a cycle that would never end as long as she remained blind to his manipulation. The first few weeks were chaotic. I'd wake up and automatically feel like texting, asking if she was okay. But I held back. My body reacted as if it were in withdrawal. That's what it was. Emotional withdrawal. I felt angry, sad, and sometimes wondered if I'd overdone it. Until one day Mateus called me. He told me that Raphael had started visiting her house again and that the situation was getting worse. It was painful to hear, but it also reinforced the decision I'd made. I could no longer try to save someone who still didn't want to be saved. I needed to take care of myself, rebuild what was left of my peace. That's when I started therapy. At first, I didn't believe talking to a stranger could help me, but the truth is, I needed to get out what had been bottled up. The psychologist helped me understand that I wasn't crazy, that what I experienced was a type of indirect emotional abuse, silent but devastating. We talked about control, guilt, and how manipulation disguises itself as friendship. I realized how much I had normalized disrespect to avoid losing someone. and how much this distanced me from myself. The pain was intense, but for the first time I felt like I was facing it head-on, without hiding behind excuses. Over time, the memories began to change shape. At first, each memory hurt like an open wound. Then they began to transform into learning experiences. I learned not to romanticize suffering, to understand that love without limits isn't love, it's dependence. I went back to doing simple things I'd forgotten. Walking alone, listening to music without thinking about anyone else, cooking just for myself. Little by little, the silence that once frightened me began to feel like a space of rest. Therapy made me realize that I didn't need to be the savior of anyone else's story. I just needed to find myself in my own. One day, months later, I received a message from Sabrina. She said she'd distanced herself from Raphael after another nasty fight, that she'd begun to notice everything I was trying to show her. She apologized. She said she now understood what I meant by boundaries. I read that message with my heart racing. Part of me wanted to get back together. Another part knew it would be a mistake. I simply replied that I hoped she could heal. And for the first time, I ended a conversation without crying. That was my liberation, realizing that the love still existed, but that the attachment was behind me. Even after that message from Sabrina, it took me a while to feel completely free. Love doesn't turn off with a switch. Sometimes I dreamed about her, waking up with the feeling that it had all been a misunderstanding and that we could start over. But all I had to do was remember the days I felt diminished, the nights I slept with a heavy heart, to understand that it wasn't longing. It was a remnant of the emotional dependence I'd experienced. The mind insists on romanticizing what hurt because emptiness is frightening, and I needed to face that emptiness head-on. I had relapses, of course. I tried to distract myself. I went out with other people, but I realized I was repeating patterns. I wanted someone who would make me forget, not someone with whom I truly wanted to build. It was painful to realize that, to move on, I would have to face loneliness and get used to it. The following months were a mix of rebuilding and resilience. I started taking care of my body again, running, eating better, sleeping more peacefully. But every now and then the past still nagged at me. One day, I ran into Sabrina on the street. She was different, thinner, with a tired look in her eyes. We stopped and talked for a few minutes. She told me she was also in therapy and that Raphael had moved to another city after a scandal at work. I listened in silence. Deep down, I felt relief that she was trying to get back on her feet. But I also realized that that cycle really needed to be over. We said goodbye with a hug, no promises, no plans. I left feeling light. For the first time, all I felt was gratitude for having survived and for her finally trying to do the same. After that encounter, something inside me shifted. It was as if I'd been waiting for that closure without knowing it. Life began to get back on track. I reconnected with friends I distanced myself from, reconnected with my family, and started going out again without fear of bumping into memories. In one of my therapy sessions, my psychologist said something that became a turning point for me. We don't lose people. We let go of what was holding us back from growing. It was then that I understood it wasn't about guilt, but about a cycle, and that when we learn to recognize patterns, we begin to break them, even if it hurts in the process. Maturity came in small, almost invisible doses. I began to recognize signs of manipulation in other contexts, to no longer accept the bare minimum, to set clear boundaries. This gave me a sense of control over my own life that I had never felt before. Before, I confused empathy with submission. Today, I understand that being kind doesn't mean self-denial. The anger that once consumed me gave way to compassion, for myself especially. I began to look at my story with more tenderness, as someone who understands that mistakes are also part of the journey. The final turning point came when I realized I could talk about all of this without crying, without feeling ashamed, without blaming myself. I shared my story in an online support group, and the response I received was incredible. People said they were going through the same thing, that they recognized themselves in my words. There, I realized the power of vulnerability. I understood that exposing pain isn't weakness, it's liberation. I'm no longer the same guy who endured in silence. Today, if something hurts me, I speak up. If someone crosses a line, I walk away. I learned that protecting yourself is also a form of love. Today, when I look back, I can see every detail of that period, like someone observing a scar that, despite its pain, reminds me of my strength. I remember Raphael breaking into the house, the silent fights, the manipulative messages, and I feel a mixture of relief and sadness. Relief because I survived, sadness because no one should have to go through something like that. But this pain shaped me, taught me to identify signs I previously ignored, to trust my judgment more. I understood that love isn't submission and that true friendship respects boundaries. I still miss Sabrina, but it's a longing free from guilt or fear. Today, she's also rebuilding herself, and I genuinely root for that. One of the hardest things was accepting that I couldn't save anyone. I tried for months and only wore myself out. That's when I understood that to truly love, I needed to put myself first. I began investing in myself, my projects, my friendships. I began to notice small signs of manipulation in other relationships, and whenever they arose, I had the courage to set boundaries. It was liberating to realize that what had previously seemed like weakness, saying no, walking away, putting my well-being first, was actually a show of strength. There are still bad days. I still feel a tightness in my chest when I think about what I lost or how much I was manipulated. But today, I can take a deep breath and remember that I survived, that I fought, and that I learned to truly love myself. I learned that some people come into our lives not to stay, but to teach us something vital. The value of protecting ourselves and the importance of recognizing our own dignity. This lesson, however painful, was liberating. Sharing my story makes me realize we're not alone. I've seen people comment that they felt seen, that they understood they don't have to tolerate manipulation or disrespect. This gives me hope because it shows that it's possible to transform pain into learning. Overcoming adversity isn't a straight line. It's full of ups and downs, setbacks and confrontations with the past. But with each step, however small, emotional freedom grows stronger. Today, I know I can handle any situation because I've been through the worst. In the end, I learned that emotional survival is a daily achievement. That self-love isn't selfish, it's a necessity. That recognizing manipulation and acting on it is an act of courage few possess. I still struggle with remnants of fear and insecurity, but now I know there is a path, that it's possible to rebuild even when everything seems lost. This story I share isn't one of hatred or resentment, but of overcoming. If you're going through something similar, know this: the pain doesn't have to be permanent, and your strength is greater than any manipulation. Emotional freedom is possible, and you can get there.